Okay, everybody, welcome once again to the Meat and Potato Show, conservative talk and awesome rock. I am your host, Christopher Mader, and we are filming once again down here in the bunker deep behind liberal territory. We almost got overrun last night, but we managed to fight them off with truth, reality, facts, and logic. But proving once again that we are nationwide. My guest is calling in from Texas, and he'll be joining us in a few minutes. But as is the tradition here on the Meat and Potatoes 2012 Conservative Media Network, and I'm trying to get adjusted in my seat here, it is time for the diatribe. And you can catch all the diatribes on my blog, thelexingtongreen.blogspot.com, thelexingtongreen.blogspot.com. And yes, the opinions expressed on the blog are the opinions of the Meat and Potatoes 2012 Conservative Media Network. Conservatism is betrayed when it becomes the private property of a narrow economic or social minority. True conservatism was shouldered out of the way by money groups that draped narrow interests in the finery of enduring principles, showing little understanding of its stewardship or preserving function. Only a grab bag of fetishes and stereotypes. The right had muffed its big chance. That's from James McGregor Burns, author of the book Roosevelt, The Lion and the Fox. I was part of an interesting conversation the other day while attending the Columbus Day Parade in Southborough. I had been invited by a good friend who was working on the Question 1 ballot initiative, the Vote Yes on 1, Stop the Automatic Gasoline Tax. The president of the Worcester Tea Party was there, and we engaged in a conversation which I thought I'd share a little bit here. As another election season winds down and the political casualties are counted on the battlefield, many conservatives are beginning to wonder about the ability to take back our country through the election process. We're getting tired of losing. There seems to be an insurmountable obstacles placed in our way by both the Republicans and the Democrats. This season, more than the last three, reveals a concerted effort from both parties and the government itself to unravel the liberty movement. No longer is it a case of battling liberalism, but rather the entire apparatus of the political system and process itself. Well-oiled campaigns and candidates hell-bent on preserving the status quo and maligning any attempt by the citizens to return the reins of power back to the citizens. In one part of the conversation, the president of the Tea Party had mentioned that many of us are caught up in fighting for or against causes and edicts handed down from on high, candidates and or incumbents or for or against. While this is a good thing on the whole, the liberty movement suffers from fatigue due to the scope and magnitude of the issues and officials. It seems almost every week some new front is opened up somewhere, and what ends up happening is we scramble to meet that threat. And as Matt O'Brien said, the scope becomes broad, but not deep. I couldn't agree more. In fact, I had suggested that perhaps this is intentional. After all, we are living under the Alinsky-Cloward-Piven model to overwhelm the system, aren't we? Matt tabled the idea that we adopt a policy of best practices and begin to focus on the larger picture and better organize the various Tea Parties, combine our forces, combine the various causes under some sort of cohesion. This has proven difficult from our experience in past conference-style meetings. I had attended one such meeting last year where we worked to develop what I call a blueprint for engagement, and the link is on the blog here. While we can look at the 25% of votes against that Mark Fisher had gained as a win, insofar as nobody expected him to get even that much, I, for one, am not satisfied with nothing less than total victory. And it's the same for the Tea Party as far as I'm concerned. It is vitally important that we band the Tea Party groups together. The opposition has us running around putting out brush fires while the forest burns down around us. The loose affiliation that defined us at our birth must now be outgrown. The opposition is betting on that not happening. They are betting on us remaining loosely affiliated, for it will allow them to continue to fracture the organization and pit one area Tea Party group against another Tea Party group. While Tea Party A in one town supports this candidate or this specific cause, Tea Party B in the other town supports another candidate or another cause. And we already see this in how the politicians and PACs are forming Tea Party caucuses and special interest groups of their own that operate above and beyond the interests of the local chapters. Enter in my good friend, Reid Chambers Jr. from Nebraska. Now, Reid and I had a conversation a while ago on the phone, and he's going to be a future guest on the Meat and Potato Show. He's developed and implemented a successful way to organize Tea Party groups across his state. The neighboring state of Oklahoma is now working to do the same thing under his model. He's also beginning to coordinate on a national level. What Reid calls for is that we organize as a political movement and develop platforms that are to be adopted on a county level first, state level second, and then a national level. Mr. Chambers also has a long history of working in political groups. He was once a selectman of his own town, and he's been in the tax and income business since he was a teenager. His family basically started their business like well over 75 years ago. And Mr. Chambers has seen time and time again the one fly in the ointment of Tea Party groups when it comes to filing their tax-exempt status. Essentially, they're filing under the wrong code. Tea Party should not be filing under their current 501 status. 501s are specifically designed for educational or social awareness groups. This is probably why the IRS was so hot on our trail after the 2010 elections. In 2010, Tea Party groups scored major wins from local town committees to congressional seats. Well, that doesn't sound like an educational or social awareness group to me, now does it? 501s also limit the ability of a Tea Party group to lobby, raise funds, officially back candidates, or front one themselves. It limits our ability to openly advertise as a political group and to directly engage a candidate in order to defeat them. Now, this is what the Swift Boat Veterans for Truth did and were able to do in helping to derail the Kerry campaign in 2004, because they filed under what Reid called a 527 political organization. They were able to do everything I just listed above. This will empower the Tea Party groups to work off a central platform and directly engage in the election process. Now, this might not sit well with some Tea Party groups who wish not to back a candidate. Did I say that right? I understand. What if the Tea Party backs a candidate and that then elected candidate pursues their own political agenda? Well, Mr. Reid has an answer for that. We put up our own candidate. One of the linchpins of putting together the conference is that platforms are adopted. We then send these platforms to seated legislators and candidate hopefuls and quite simply ask them if they will adopt these platforms as part of their agenda. If they do not, then the Tea Party conference puts up their own candidate who will run on those platforms. And since now all the Tea Party groups are 527s under Reid's plan, they can raise the money, they can file the paperwork to put the campaign together, and they can run the advertisements, they can get their candidate on the ballot and directly affect the outcome in November. It makes the Tea Party group a power player without compromising the founding principles that define the organization: limited government, unapologetic American sovereignty, and constitutional originalism. Considering that virtually every city and town in America has some sort of Tea Party group, the possibilities are unimaginable. Interestingly enough, this might explain the constant media and government drumbeat to denounce the Tea Party. They know that if this were to happen, then it would signal the end of liberalism and big government itself in America. They have to continue to fracture the organization, for imagine the impact of the 200 plus Tea Party groups just right here in Massachusetts alone, if they all filed as 2527s and financed their own candidate for governor. Imagine that possibility. In 2009, the Tea Party was born, and by the following year, elections were being decided as a result of the awakening in America. And I remember those rallies in 2009 and in 2010. Even Glenn Beck with his 9/12 project. I remember that. The mall in D.C. was packed. Hundreds of thousands of people. Each and every rally. Hundreds of thousands of people. Think about that. By 2012, that pendulum had swung back as the movement floundered. This was also the time when the IRS began to target the Tea Party groups. In 2013, I attended the Defund Obamacare rally in October on Capitol Hill. We were lucky to fill the Capitol Hill lawn. 3,000, maybe 4,000 people. It was pitiful. The co-opting of the movement by political action committees and the stack of election losses in 2012 began to affect the movement. The members responded by pulling out. Noted British psychiatrist R.D. Laing wrote in his 1967 book, The Politics of Experience, "No group can be expected to be held together for long on the pure flame of such unified experience. Groups are liable to disappear through attacks from other groups. But the simplest and perennial threat to all groups come from the simple defection of its members, the danger of evaporation." The press is watching us, folks, and so is the opposition. They see the dwindling numbers and know their tactic is working. They see their policy of divide and conquer creating results. The loose affiliation that was once our strength is now our Achilles heel. Before, we could not be pigeonholed on a particular issue or a candidate. Well, now people are saying, well, then what do you stand for? Who do you support? Because our commitment is very broad but not very deep, we are being shouldered out of the way, as author J.M. Burns wrote earlier, and we cannot sustain on the pure flame of our cause but we will face the danger of complete evaporation. And that is the diatribe. Ladies and gentlemen, calling in from Texas, my good friend, Colonel Reid Reasor. How are you, Colonel? Good evening.
Hey, Christopher, what a good opening. I tell you, those folks that are listening, if you are, Chris pretty much has it nailed on the head. He does his research, he does his background, he interviews people, and even after he interviews people, he goes and checks what the person has to say for accuracy. So
you have to. Yeah.
Really echo a good job there, Christopher. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So what do you think, though? I mean, these are things that are happening. I quite literally wrote this after, well, I opened up the thing with the fact that I was at a Columbus Day parade, and some people who are working on this gasoline initiative to repeal the automatic gas tax, I was invited to go down there. It's like, Chris, come on down, bring your camera, why don't you film? And again, like I said, I ran into Matt, and we started talking about this. And it was funny that he came to me and said, Chris, I want to talk to you. I want to throw an idea past you. Because, like I said, a few days earlier, I had talked to this guy, Reid Chambers, on the phone, and he's going to come on the show later on next month. And it was so, when Matt started talking to me, I said, Matt, that's amazing that you're talking to me. I just talked to this guy from Nebraska, and he got this whole thing going. Long story short, I talked to Matt the other night, and we've adopted some other filing. Matt's going to send me all the paperwork and stuff because I need to know what I can do as a media person working in the Tea Party group here. But I had suggested to Matt, and I gave him Reid Chambers' information, his phone number, and everything. I said, you got to talk to this guy. You got to talk to this guy and think about doing it. And the reason I thought about you, which is why I also got hold of you to get onto the show, because I remember what happened to you during your election. So why don't you comment some on the blog piece that I just read and talk about your election, Colonel?
Sure. I think you got a good beat on how the established systems make it difficult for anybody else to gain access to power. If you wanted to be on the ballot, you either have to go through the Republican primary system or the Democrat primary system, of which most of the Republican primary systems is establishment Republicans that are already there, multi-million dollars when they come into the battle chest. They already have media experience, and so if you're going to get the attention that you need, you're either going to have millions of dollars yourself, in which case we don't want to elect a bunch of millionaires and billionaires to D.C. We want to elect the common people, the person that are out there doing their work. So in that regard, when you say that, it's exactly right. So for us as a Tea Party person to get on the ballot, it is excruciatingly painful to be there without a political organization to back you and make what you had just said, the unified statement already filed with the federal government as a political agency that you can put candidates on that we have vetted as Tea Party guys. Carl Rowe said you Tea Party guys don't know how to vet candidates and support them, and he's right, and you just summarized it. Even if we were to run around and Blaine Stovall, this good friend of mine here in Texas, and he had a good majority of the Tea Party vote, he had a great point. He said, Reid, even if I go to every Tea Party group in Texas, and they have, there's no more than usually about 100 to 120 people at the maximum. They're small groups. Even if I went to every one, I'm only going to get probably around 90,000 votes. Because that's just if you get the people at the meetings. So to get elected in Texas, it's 900,000 people. That's the average to be elected to the Senate. So, even if we went around to all the Tea Party and got everyone in every meeting to say, yeah, that's my guy, it's still not going to be enough. Because we're going to need to get out of our little meetings and do exactly what you just said. Engage, challenge, get people to understand, wait, these are constitutional fundamentalists that are trying to keep our Fourth and Sixth Amendment rights that have been taken. They're trying to get them back. These are the folks that believe that where we are right now is exactly what Harvard University said we are, and that's an oligarchy.
Yeah.
The sixth tenet of communism, for us, if you don't comply, no choice in what you get, but the sixth tenet is that the government becomes the bourgeoisie, and everyone else is a proletariat. And the largest zip code with the millionaires, as you know, is D.C. Our own Austin City Councilman was an average elected guy 8 years ago. Salary $45,000. Now is worth $18 million.
Wow.
And so the question is, how did you make that much money in this amount of time of $45,000? And you said good investments. And they even label
Yeah, and I agree with your numbers. You know what you had said about your friend. He says, I might only get 90,000. The reason why, and he's absolutely correct. I'm thinking about what it would be even here in Massachusetts, because even our Worcester Tea Party group, we've got our core people, and we have members, people who have joined us and come to our events and our speaking engagements and stuff. What is important, though, is that we do organize like that, and we take. Well, let's take the number that you just said, the 90,000 that your friend would get. If we get those 90,000 organized, so that 90,000 gets the message out to everybody else. One of the things I skipped over in the blog, and I did it mostly just for time things. There's a group out there called New Organizing Institute, liberal. Progressive organization. They arrange campaigns, they arrange funding. They're a 527 as well. And again, folks, it's in my blog. There's a link on the blog. The piece that I just wrote, there's a link to not only the New Organizing Institute, but to the expose that I wrote on voter fraud and the New Organizing Institute. These guys are scary characters. These guys have their proverbial you-know-what wired, and they are organizing campaigns, and they're becoming powerful, and they're financed. And this is why I thought maybe we should go in that direction. I completely agreed with my friend Reid Chambers from Nebraska that, this seemed, to me, it just seemed like the perfect idea. Now, I'm wondering if, and weigh in on this, Colonel, do you think that it's purposeful, that they're targeting the Tea Party, splintering the group, because they're afraid that we might discover, that we might get to that 527 status, that we might become an organized political movement? Do you think they're afraid? That's why they're slandering us?
Well, I think absolutely. And here's a quick example in Texas we brought up. Before the media weighed in and made this a binary contest between Steve Stockman and Cornyn, who I believe needs personally to go in jail, but he signed away our Fourth Amendment rights. He signed for us NSA spying, which is illegal, and he signed for the removal of your Sixth Amendment indefinite detention. And for your listeners out there, in the historical military context, any nation who's ever taken the Fourth and the Sixth together have always wound up killing their own people. So we've got to go back. But I wanted to answer your question quickly. And what you had mentioned that was going on in Texas was, yes, they are very, very scared. And the reason being is because even Texas was the very first primary. Going into the primary, which was in last March, John Cornyn had 51%. There wasn't a huge candidate against him. It was 6 or 7 of us Tea Party guys running around trying to gain support, and we didn't have the national app. I suspect totally.
Yeah.
If we would have had the organization that you're talking about, we would have been a lot more credible to the media in making it a tri-race. But as soon as Steve Stockman entered the race, the media said, "Hey, that's an easy kill right there." And so when they made that binary, they intentionally excluded every Tea Party member from any of the conversations. So the only persons that were interviewing the Tea Party guys were the Houston radio station, Austin radio station, 1 or 2 down in San Antonio, yourself, and people out of state.
Yeah.
But nobody in the state of Texas would talk to the Tea Party guys, the big media guys, the Dallas Morning News. All they wanted was Cornyn and Stockman. And as soon as that happened, Cornyn won by 59, kind of a landslide against us. But we had him down to 50%,
Right.
which means in Texas there's a runoff. So if Stockman hadn't have entered, we would have probably done much better. Cornyn would not have had 50%. Dwayne Stonewall would have been in the runoff conversation, a Tea Party runoff guy. So I look at it and go, I believe Karl Rove stepped in and said, "Hey, my dear friend here, John Cornyn, isn't even started his campaigning yet. He's already down 50%, and we've got to do something to shake up this race." And that's what they did. And
They put a plant in.
I like what Stockman's done in the Congress, but the way he conducted his campaign, he wasn't really serious about winning in the first place.
Yeah, he was just there as a wedge. I remember we had that conversation, and I did a little bit of research into that and some of the material that I dug up and read. I mean, it was just so obvious. I mean, the media comes out saying that, no, it's not a plant. No, he's not a plant. No, this isn't intended to drive. No. Yet, you know, what's that saying? If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it must be a duck. It's like, or the other saying, if it looks and smells like you know what, then it must be you know what. You know.
It is, and in talking with some folks on John Cornyn's campaign staff, they were very concerned in the report back, because if the Tea Party person had beaten the #2 Republican, or I think he's the #3 ranking Republican, John Cornyn, it would have really sent shockwaves. I mean, even if we'd have got him into just a runoff conversation, that would have crumbled
Right.
the GOP chances. So the GOP saw it as a huge threat. And then you saw the shenanigans that were going on in the race in Mississippi and LA, and not LA, but Louisiana. But in those races, when you start to intentionally subvert the GOP message to gain Democrat support, and to the Democrats out there listening, which I doubt there's very many,
Yeah.
but to the Democrats out there that are listening, your party right now has the exact same platform of the godless communists in the 1980 Reagan era that we military did unspeakable violence against. We killed them because of what they did in Nicaragua and Honduras, around the world. And we did that for the Bill of Rights and freedom. We're the only nation in the history of the world that says, I'm going to go around the world and do violence for your rights over there.
That's right.
And just to hear the people trashing our country on the left means that they want to get rid of the Constitution, and they want communism. They're determined, they're organized, well financed, and the reason that they're spending the amount of money they are spending and outspending us is because they believe, and I believe rightly so, that the people that are putting the most money in are the ones that are being promised seats at the table of the grand power structure when we lose our sovereignty.
That's exactly true. That is so true. I like what you say that we're the only nation that would go around the world to commit violence for the sake of somebody else's rights and their freedoms. Speaking about international policies, look at what the mess that we've left in the Middle East and the mess that is happening there now, and we're not doing anything about it. We're not doing jack about it, Reid. What's going on over there?
Well, we have to understand that a complete narcissist is not going to process. And the left, all the way back to Eisenhower, when Eisenhower mentioned the words military-industrial complex, the left dialed into that and said, we're not going to trust the military at all, ever. And they entrenched that in Vietnam and their hatred for Westmoreland. And when they took over and started targeting from the White House, that's why Vietnam is communist today.
Right.
If the politicians would have sent the political executives, sent the rules of engagement, got out of the way, trusted the generals, Vietnam would be free. So there's people dying right now because we allowed Vietnam to be communist.
And the same thing is happening in the Middle East. I see exactly the point that you're saying. What is happening with ISIS and the takeover of Iraq, it's being run from the White House. Instead of the military commanders on the ground saying, we're going to go here, we're going to do this, we're going to bomb here, we're going to attack here, and we're going to drive these people out. It's being run by the White House. Go ahead, Reid.
Well, it's a lack of listening. It is arrogance and ignorance with the intention to do harm, all wrapped in one. So, I mean, he is a Muslim, and he doesn't really want to do violence to fellow Muslims. I mean, his policy of not shutting down air travel to Africa, pulling out of Iraq when every general, and there's not that many four-star generals, there's only about 14 of them. They're highly trained, 30 to 35 years, spending their entire lives sacrificing time to study military warfare and doctrine. And every single one of the 4 stars, the chief of staff said, don't pull out of Iraq, and here's what's going to happen if you do in this power vacuum. Yep. And that's exactly what happened, because he wanted to end it because of his mistrust of his generals. Now, what's going on right now is also mistrust of the generals and the NSA. We told him ISIS is building. If you want to stop it, you could have stopped it 14 months ago.
Sure.
When it first started. And, these terrorist groups don't start in the cities, in Mosul, and they don't start in places in Baghdad.
Yeah.
They start out in the country. And so when we have folks saying, here they are, this is it, we could have terminated it early. Now, the problem that we have right now is he's still not listening. And here's what I mean. For me and my fighter, I have to go through an entire matrix before I can use weapons to hurt somebody. I got to make sure that that's not friendly. I got to make sure that it actually is an enemy. Well, there's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
If I look down and see, hey, there's a T-72 tank, I still can't shoot it until it meets the hostile criteria. It has to be, have to allow that tank the ability to defect. You know, he's not in a column, he's running away, okay, I can't hit him. But when you have the people on the ground in civilian vehicles, not in uniform, the problem to the fighter pilot is identification of the target on the ground. I mean, they see him, but then you go, well, that's 4 Toyota trucks. I mean, I don't know if it's carrying 4 more guys with rocket-propelled grenades inside and under tarps. We can't find that. So what the Air Force has come forward and said was, Mr. President, sir, what we advise is if you're going to do this with air power only, we've got to have people on the ground to help us with identification. And that is, here's the ISIS trucks, here's the laser designator, here's the GPS coordinates you're cleared on.
Sure.
Navy SEALs, forward spotters, Marine recon,
Yes.
CACPs, we've got to have those people on the ground when you're attacking folks that you cannot identify from the air. If this is our strategy, give it up. I mean, as soon as they get into Baghdad, that pretty much dictates the fact that we're going to have to fight them again on a major war.
Certainly.
Because once you're in the city, air power is pretty tough to use.
Yeah, it's limited. You're going to end up blowing up a lot of stuff you don't want to blow up, and then that just appears on CNN as the evil America, you know, killing civilians.
And they hide behind the mosques,
Yeah.
the weapons in the mosques. So, you know, I mean, they don't adhere. The part that we need to understand is we want to adhere to the Geneva Convention. They won't. And so, you know, in our moral high ground, where, yeah, we're going to limit collateral damage, we're going to make sure we don't kill friendlies, we're going to make sure we don't kill civilians, women, and children, and we're going to eliminate them, that requires us, if we're going to take the moral high ground, that requires us to have people on the ground to help us. Even if you were to fuse communications, intelligence, cell phones, all that together, we have to have the spotters on the ground.
Yeah, that's exactly true. That is so true. You can't. And then the problem arises is what happens if something happens to the recon, the Navy SEALs, somebody, they get captured. I mean, look at our situation with the Marine in Mexico. I mean, I know that's kind of a different situation, but I mean, in a war situation, you know, these people end up getting captured. They end up being beheaded live on the net, and it seems like we just don't have the gumption to go in and get our people and to rescue our people, and I wonder if, well, you had said, you know, he's not listening. I think I want to switch a little bit here. Get back to the question I was thinking in my head while you were talking there. What causes the lefty, the beatnik, the long-haired, pot-smoking, you know, peace man, you know, well, war is evil, you know, evil America. What causes that mentality? Is it a lack of education? Maybe their upbringing? Maybe, I mean, what is that? I mean, I know I was young and I was stupid when I was a teenager, but I quickly grew out of that. As soon as I left high school and went to work and started making my own money and realizing it, I mean, my entire attitude in life completely changed. But take over now.
Well, I think there's many things that impact how that narrative is, and the first part of it is that they're utopic thinkers. You know, that and you and I and everybody in the military, we would all, and truly, this is true, we all would love to hold hands and be friends, totally disarm, grow crops, not spend any money on warfare, and then what would happen is we would all be slaves. That's the history of it. Because, you know, the naivety of it is, well, why don't you all just hold hands and disarm and everyone else will? And that's not what's going to happen. Every time, and it's a historical blind spot. They don't study military history. They don't, and they're trying to cut, and that's exactly what Common Core does, is cut out almost everything in World War II, the reasons for it, why we did it. And it doesn't go through the narratives of the history of warfare. It's culture, religion, economics, men, women, marriage, border lines, everything from what crops you grow. The history of warfare is always going to continue to be the same reasons that we go after each other. The part of it is, the part of it that the Islamic State thinks, and it's also, unfortunately, part of the way the left thinks is that they're right. And they're so right, they're justified in taking someone else's rights. And so when the left, when they go about, and they think they're all being peaceful, but what they're actually doing is enacting a violent, oppressive government that is going to use violence on people.
Yeah.
And they're down with that. They're cool with that. And it kind of defies their own logic. The left peacenik guys would love to see Tea Party militant militia guys get blown away. And so even in their own hearts, they belie their own narrative when they use force.
It's very interesting that you bring that up. That that the history of war, and that through war, you're right. Through war, a lot of what we live under today has been determined by the past wars that we've had. Not only our technology, but you're right. Even from the food we eat, to the crops we grow, to the way the nations are set up, the way we interact with each other. And I was wondering if war is a natural condition. What I mean by that is that you look at animals in the wild. Yes, they hunt to eat, but they also hunt. They also fight to defend and to take property or to territory, and they defend their territory. And so I'm looking at war as I'm wondering if it's a natural condition. It's just something that is.
Well, let's look at the condition. Let's say that there weren't any war. Let's say that, just for conversation's sake, that everybody is disarmed. We've got one world government, and we're all living under the peaceful leadership of our United Nations folks. Who is going to tell me that I cannot kneel down in public and pray to Jesus? It's going to be the jihadist is going to kill me. So right there, right off the bat, I was threatening on. Who is going to tell me when I step out and go, well, gosh, that policy is ridiculously stupid to our young women who want to be in the military, or something like this, and then have somebody arrest me? So we have to understand that we uniquely, Britain, the UK doesn't have a constitution. They don't have a Bill of Rights. We do. Our constitution and our Bill of Rights cost us 800,000 people. That's how much blood was spent for these 10 things. And so when we as a society, and we have to look at what we value as important and what we would do violence to stop, and that is taking our Bill of Rights. If somebody were to come to your family and indefinitely detain your daughter and then do cruel and unusual punishment against her, that would be a moral affront to you, and you would do violence to stop that person from hurting your daughter. That's our values.
That is true. That is absolutely true.
That wouldn't happen to an Islamic family. If someone came and took their daughter for whatever reason, indefinitely detained them without trial, and did cruel and unusual punishment just on the accusation that she committed adultery, that would be cool with some Islamic family. So, especially the radicals, and there's so much difference. And to the folks that are Islamic listening, please accept my apology. I know there's a difference between Shiite and Sunni and the PUK and the KPU, and I know that it's different. But in the Islamic extremist state, where the dominant male and the daughters are expendable, that's not something he would fight for. So who in this world government is going to tell whom to compromise against whether to do violence? That's why we have to maintain sovereignty. Our values are different. They just are. And we will fight to defend those. Now, the left doesn't want us to fight to defend those. The left wants what we just talked about, that one world homogenous government, and part of it is to get rid of all religion, because all religion is bad. And it's interesting.
I think it's just to get rid of Christian religion. I think it's just Christianity, because Christianity, to a certain degree, and you're a Christian, I'm a Christian, to a certain degree, one of the things I've learned over the years about being on the side of Christ is that my individuality and my sovereignty has flourished and grown, and I have a better sense of self-awareness and independence, and I think that's what the left, that's one reason why the left wants to get rid of Christianity, is because it breeds independence, it breeds individual sovereignty and individual thinking, and we can't have that mindset in a one-world government. I'm sorry, sir, go ahead.
No, that's a very good point. You bring it up, and you also bring up that the left loves to bemoan, the Federalist Papers and say, well, they're not official documents. Well, actually, they were. They were official documents to each state. Before we had the union of our republic, these guys had to go back and explain to their states, hey, this is what we talked about, and here is what it means. That's what the Federalist Papers are. And our founding principles are truly based on Christian ethics and founding principles. I'm sorry to... most of the Ten Commandments are our laws. Don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't lie, don't bear false witness. It's right down the list, except for the 4 major provisions that, the commandments are about your relationship with God, because we don't
true.
Even in Texas, I don't know if you heard about this story, but they did a no-knock raid just outside of Houston. Smashed in the door. It's a wrong address. The guy said, "Well, what are you doing?" The cops did not identify themselves. Didn't announce why they were there. Smashed in the door, ran upstairs, and the guy shot him. The judge said this guy was completely justified because the cops did not announce who they were. They did not stop through the door and go, "Police, we have a warrant, we're here to search." They just smashed at the door and started rubbing and trying very aggressively. And so the guy just shot him. I think he killed two of them. And the judge said, "Look, you violated the law, cops. This guy was completely justified." So you're right. And part of that hatred against Christ, other than that's what the end times say is going to happen, and I'd love for people that aren't Christians just to go through and look at a couple of the verses that talk about the end times. And the narrative from the left is exactly what the Bible says they're going to say. It's almost word for word. I mean, it just slays me. And I'll be looking that up and trying to get that verse to you. But they want to get rid of Christianity because they want to get rid of your rights. I had an argument with a professor, my doctorate in social psychology, and I wanted to learn how you can manipulate masses of people. But I had an argument, and I said, "Well, Bill of Rights is very important." And she said, "Well, I don't even know my rights." I said, "Ma'am, isn't that the point?
Oh.
If you don't know your rights, how do you know you've lost them?"
This is so true. Getting back to the Islamic, though, you're right about they think that killing, raping, murdering, to some they think that's cool. It's their way of life. When we talk about this disarmament and this one world government, it doesn't matter to them on the other side. These people are, I'm going to use the word, they're batshit crazy is what they are. They're completely crazy. I don't know if it's I was reading and watching, and I watched a documentary that because of their because they marry within the family, cousins and uncles and that kind of thing, that there's a theory going around that these people are mentally deficient because you have 1400 years. Islam came around 600 AD, somewhere around there. Because you've had 1400 years of this inbreeding going on, you have the definitive potential of looking at an entire mass society of mental defects is what you have. And it might explain why there is this. I mean, these people flip out at the slightest thing. I mean, they draw a picture of Muhammad, they riot in the street. Every time you see something going on with an Islamic group in the Middle East or even in Europe protesting, it's violence, it's anger, it's hatred, it's attack. Everything is screaming and yelling into the camera. Nothing is discussed. Nothing. It's like, oh, we're going to form a Muslim group and we're going to go after this political group and we're going to, like the Tea Party would. The Tea Party would get together and we'd have a meeting and we'd get people together and yeah, we'd have a rally and speeches, but that'd be it. We'd pick up our trash and go home. You don't see that from the Muslim side. You don't see the Islamics going, oh, well, we're going to form a political group and we're going to have a rally and we're going to give a speech and this, that, the other thing, and then we're going to go home. No, it always turns into waving guns and screaming and yelling and blowing stuff up and destroying the property. Am I a little off on there by saying that perhaps because they're inbreeding there that they might be a little mentally off? Am I off? Am I off on that?
No, I think you're right on the money, and I think the proper words are they are. If you know the history of the Middle East, it goes all the way back to Abraham. Now, our left folks that listen to, oh, Abraham's a mythical figure, and said, well, no, he's not. And even if he was, it doesn't matter that you don't believe in Moses and Abraham. They do. And if you look at what Abraham was promised, the land which encompasses Israel, Syria, Jordan, the eastern part of Egypt and the Sinai Peninsula, that's what ISIS wants. They want to go back to Abraham's original promise that was given to Abraham's children.
Right.
Now, he had two leading sons. Abraham